Number 10, the man-snatching eagle picture. You finally managed to sail a canoe across a frankly unreasonable amount of ocean to land on a beautiful, untouched island. Paradise, no predators, lush forests, and giant, goofy-looking flightless birds called moa just waddling around, waiting to become dinner? You are the apex predator. You are the king of this new world. Then, the sky darkens, you hear a screech that sounds like a pterodactyl gargling nails, and a shadow the size of a hang glider blots out the sun. Before you can even look up, you're airborne. Meet the Haast's eagle. This wasn't your garden variety bald eagle that majestically swoops down to grab a fish. This was a feathered nightmare with a wingspan of nearly 10 feet and talons the size of a fully grown tiger's claws. It was the largest eagle known to have ever existed, and it lived in New Zealand until about 600 years ago. Its primary food source was the aforementioned moa, a bird that could stand up to 12 feet tall and weigh over 200 kilograms. This eagle didn't just peck at its prey, it was a dive-bombing assassin, hitting with enough force to crush the pelvis of a giant bird on impact. When the first humans, the ancestors of the Maori, arrived, they were, to put it mildly, on the menu. For a long time, scientists dismissed the Maori legends of the puakai, a monstrous bird that would snatch children and warriors alike, as mere folklore. That is, until they started finding human skeletons with talon marks that perfectly matched the Haast's eagle's claws. When humans hunted the moa to extinction, the eagle simply switched its primary target to the next largest, slowest piece of meat walking around. So while your ancestors were fending off cave bears, the original New Zealanders had to develop a habit of constantly checking the sky for a literal death machine coming to abduct them. Number 9, the hell pig. Nature, in its infinite wisdom, has occasionally produced animals that seem less like a product of evolution and more like a dare between cosmic entities. The entelodont, colloquially and very accurately known as the hell pig, is a prime example. It roamed across Eurasia and North America for millions of years, and it looked like a warthog that had been kicked out of hell for being too aggressive. Standing over 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing up to 2,000 pounds. This thing was less of a pig and more of a living, breathing, battering ram with an attitude problem. Its face alone was a masterpiece of intimidation. It had massive, bone-crushing jaws that could open unnaturally wide, and weird, bony knobs sticking out of its cheeks, which paleontologists think were either for protection or just to make it look even more horrifying during headbutting contests. And it wasn't a picky eater. The entelodont was an omnivore in the most brutal sense of the word. It would hunt, but it was also a kleptoparasite, which is the fancy scientific term for a bully that steals other predators' food. Imagine a pack of saber-toothed cats taking down a prize meal, only for a squadron of hell pigs to come charging in, snorting and foaming, to just take it from them. Few argued. Weirdly enough, genetic analysis suggests these monstrosities aren't related to modern pigs at all. Their closest living relatives? Hippos and whales, which somehow makes it even worse. Our very, very distant primate ancestors were scuttling around in the trees while these things patrolled the ground below, operating as the undisputed schoolyard bully of the entire Cenozoic era. They weren't just eating to survive, they were a force of pure, galloping spite. Number 8, the bus-sized crocodile. There's a primal part of the human brain that is deeply, deeply uncomfortable with things lurking just beneath the surface of the water. Now, imagine if the thing lurking was the size of a city bus and thought you looked like a convenient fleshy juice box. Say hello to Sarcosuchus imperator, the emperor of flesh crocodiles, or, as it's more lovingly known, super croc. This beast lived during the Cretaceous period, meaning it got to terrorize actual dinosaurs. We're not talking about a slightly bigger alligator here. A modern saltwater crocodile, itself a terrifying submarine of teeth and muscle, tops out at around 20 feet. Sarcosuchus was 40 feet long and weighed an estimated 8 to 10 tons. Its skull alone was the size of a grown man. When you look at a picture of its fossilized head next to a person, you realize that this creature wouldn't just bite you, it would inhale you. Its diet consisted of whatever it wanted, which mostly included giant, car-sized fish and any unfortunate dinosaurs that wandered too close to the riverbank for a drink. It employed the same strategy as modern crocs: lie perfectly still, looking like a harmless log, then explode out of the water with enough force to drag a multi-ton animal to its doom. Thankfully, humanity never crossed paths with Sarcosuchus. We should probably send a strongly worded thank you card to the asteroid that took it out, because trying to invent the concept of a boat or a bridge would have been a significantly harder sell to our ancestors if the logs floating in the river occasionally had a 6-foot-long mouth full of railroad spikes. Number 7, the hatchet-faced bird. Imagine a creature with the legs of an ostrich, the personality of a honey badger, and a head that functions as a living flesh-pecking battle axe. For about 5 million years, this wasn't some fever dream monster from a fantasy novel. It was just a regular Tuesday in the Americas. These were the forest racids, better known by their extremely cool and entirely accurate name, terror birds. And the last and largest of the North American line, Titanus wooleri, may have stuck around long enough to meet the first humans. Standing up to 8 feet tall and weighing over 300 pounds, the terror bird was a flightless, carnivorous killing machine. It couldn't fly, but it didn't need to. It was a sprinter, likely capable of chasing down prehistoric horses. But its real weapon was its head. It had a skull that was over 1.5 feet long, tipped with a wickedly sharp hooked beak. Scientists believe it hunted in a particularly gruesome fashion, either using its powerful neck to slam its beak downwards like a pickaxe to crack open skulls, or by grabbing smaller animals, shaking them violently to break their spines, and then swallowing them whole. These birds were the apex predators of South America for millennia. Then, when the land bridge formed, Titanus charged north into what is now Florida and Texas, ready to terrorize a whole new continent. The timeline is a bit fuzzy, but some evidence suggests they survived until just before, or perhaps even during, the arrival of the first people in the Americas. Our ancestors, fresh from dodging mammoths and saber-toothed cats, might have also had to contend with a giant, aggressive bird that looked at them and saw a walking sack of protein. It's one thing to get chased by a wolf. It's another thing entirely to be stalked by an 8-foot-tall avian nightmare that kills you with its face. Number 6, the bear on stilts. Everyone knows the basic rule of the wild. Don't mess with a grizzly bear. It's a half-ton tank of muscle, claws, and parental rage. But the modern grizzly is just the eco-friendly, fuel-efficient model. Prehistoric North America had the premium, gas-guzzling sports package, the giant short-faced bear, Arctodus simus. This thing makes a grizzly look like a teddy bear. It was the largest terrestrial mammalian carnivore in North America during the Ice Age, standing nearly 6 feet at the shoulder on all fours, and a terrifying 12 feet tall when it stood up on its hind legs. It was big enough to look into a second-story window. But its sheer size wasn't even the scariest part. Unlike the squat, powerful build of modern bears, the short-faced bear had bizarrely long, slender legs. It was built less like a brawler and more like a cheetah. This was a bear designed for running, capable of hitting speeds over 30 miles per hour across the open plains. Now, there's a debate among paleontologists. Was it a super predator running down prey with its incredible speed? Or was it the ultimate scavenger, using its height to spot kills from miles away and its speed to get there and chase off packs of dire wolves or even saber-toothed cats? Frankly, it doesn't matter. Either you're being run down by a bear that's faster than you, or you've just finished a successful hunt only to see a 1,500-pound monster galloping towards you to steal your hard-earned meal. And yes, it was absolutely sharing the landscape with the first humans in America. The short-faced bear was basically a grizzly that decided to trade in its cozy hibernation cave for a track and field scholarship. Our ancestors are lucky they ever decided that leaving the cave was a good idea in the first place. Number 5, the Australian land dragon. Nearly every ancient culture on Earth has a myth about giant, man-eating dragons. For the first human inhabitants of Australia, however, it wasn't a myth. It was just the local fauna. Say hello to Megalania, a giant monitor lizard that prowled the outback during the Pleistocene. To get a sense of this creature, picture a Komodo dragon. Now, inject it with a comical amount of growth hormones and give it a venomous bite. That's Megalania. Estimates vary, but this lizard likely reached lengths of 18 to 23 feet and weighed well over 1,000 pounds, making it the largest terrestrial lizard ever known. It was the undisputed apex predator of its environment, hunting giant kangaroos, massive wombats the size of small cars, and basically anything else that moved, and like its modern Komodo dragon relative. Its hunting method was terrifyingly passive-aggressive. It had a mouthful of serrated teeth and, scientists now believe, active venom glands. This means it didn't have to win the fight outright. One good bite was all it took. The venom and a cocktail of septic bacteria would go to work, and the Megalania could just follow its wounded prey from a safe distance, waiting for it to collapse from blood poisoning and infection. This real-life dragon was very much a part of the landscape when the first Aboriginal people arrived in Australia some 50,000 years ago. Just surviving in Pleistocene Australia was playing life on the highest difficulty setting. Navigating a world where you could be kicked to death by a giant kangaroo, trampled by a rhino-sized wombat, or eaten by a land crocodile was bad enough. But adding a station wagon-sized venomous lizard that could kill you with a single bite and then patiently wait for you to die is just unfair. Number 4. The bear dog. Nature has a strange sense of humor. You look at a platypus and think, okay, that's just a duck, a beaver, and an otter that got scrambled in a cosmic teleporter accident. It's weird, but mostly harmless. Millions of years ago, however, nature created a hybrid that was far less comical and infinitely more lethal, the Amphicyonidae, better known as bear dogs. And no, this wasn't some cute, fluffy crossbreed. This was a walking identity crisis with a taste for blood. The bear dog wasn't actually a bear or a dog, but a member of its own extinct family that just happened to cherry-pick the most terrifying traits from both. They had the heavy, powerful body and bone-crushing jaws of a bear, allowing them to ambush prey with brute force, but they also had longer, more dog-like legs and feet that were planted flat on the ground, giving them more stamina than a bear. This meant they could not only hit you like a furry truck, but they could also chase you for a respectable distance beforehand. They were the best or worst of both worlds. These creatures were wildly successful, spreading across North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa, and reigning for nearly 40 million years. The bigger species, like Amphicyonidae ingens, were the size of a grizzly and were apex predators, our distant primate ancestors, who were just getting the hang of not falling out of trees, would have lived in mortal fear of these things. Imagine you're a small, clever ape. You know how to avoid bears by being nimble, and you know how to avoid canids by climbing. What do you do when the thing hunting you is a perfect fusion of both? The answer is probably just stay in the tree and hope it gets bored. The bear dog was nature's indecisive predator, and our ancestors were lucky to outlast them. Number 3, the wolf in sheep's clothing. When you think of the largest carnivorous land mammal of all time, you probably picture something vicious and wolf-like, a true blue predator with fangs, claws, and a bad attitude. You'd be right about the attitude, but spectacularly wrong about the family tree. Meet Andrewsarchus mongoliensis, a creature that was very likely the biggest, baddest meat-eating land mammal ever, and it was related to sheep and hippos. This biological paradox is known to science from a single, solitary fossil, a skull. But what a skull it is! It's nearly 3 feet long, packed with enormous, powerful teeth. From this one piece of evidence, paleontologists have extrapolated a monster. The early reconstructions, the ones that still dominate our imagination, depicted a beast the size of a rhinoceros, with the shape of a colossal, demonic wolf. It prowled the shores of a prehistoric sea in what is now Mongolia. And with a head that size, it could have preyed on almost anything it wanted, including giant, primitive rhinos and the shelled ancestors of turtles. But here's the scientific punchline. That massive, terrifying skull is structured in a way that places Andrewsarchus firmly in the order Artiodactyla, the same group of even-toed, hoofed mammals that contains deer, goats, pigs, and whales. This thing, this supreme carnivore, was technically an ungulate. It was a predator that likely had hooves instead of paws. It was a literal wolf in sheep's clothing, or, more accurately, a killer with the evolutionary resume of a farm animal. Andrewsarchus is proof that deep down, inside every gentle herbivore, there's a genetic echo of a rhino-sized murder machine just waiting for an opportunity. Number 2, the real King Kong Hollywood has always been obsessed with giant apes. From King Kong to Mighty Joe Young, we have a strange cultural fascination with colossal, chest-beating primates. But for one of our direct ancestors, Homo erectus, this wasn't a monster movie. It was the neighbor. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancient relatives shared the forests of Southeast Asia with Gigantopithecus blacki, the largest ape that ever lived. We're talking about a primate that stood nearly 10 feet tall and weighed over half a ton. Its jaw was so massive and its teeth so large that for a long time, its fossilized molars were sold in Chinese apothecaries as dragon teeth. Based on analysis of its jaw, Gigantopithecus was almost certainly a herbivore, likely living off a diet of tough vegetation like bamboo, which it could crush as easily as you'd snap a celery stick. But here's a fun fact about nature. Herbivore does not mean harmless. A modern gorilla is a peaceful herbivore, but a silverback can tear a person limb from limb if it feels threatened. Now, imagine a gorilla that's twice as big and shares a habitat with your small, struggling band of early humans. This is the forgotten reality for our ancestors in Asia. They were trying to gather food, find shelter, and not become lunch for a saber-toothed cat, all while living in the shadow of a real-life kaiju. Any confrontation, accidental or otherwise, would have been laughably one-sided. You can't throw a primitive spear at a 10-foot-tall wall of muscle and expect to win. It is the ultimate prehistoric showdown. Our clever, tool-using ancestors versus a literal giant. Gigantopithecus eventually died out, likely because the climate changed and its preferred food sources disappeared. But for an unimaginably long time, our family tree grew right next to theirs, and we're just lucky ours wasn't the one that got trampled. Number 1. The Predator Gauntlet. We've spent this whole time talking about individual monsters, a giant eagle here, a bus-sized crocodile there. But the single most lethal, man-eating threat that history has almost completely forgotten wasn't a single species. It was the stone-cold fact that for the vast majority of human existence, everything was trying to eat us. All at once, all the time. The number 1 forgotten killer was the world itself. Welcome to the Pleistocene Predator Gauntlet. Today, we live at the top of the food chain. Large predators are rare, isolated, and generally afraid of us. But for our ancestors, that was the complete opposite of reality. They were small, slow, squishy bipeds with no natural armor and pathetically dull teeth. They were a walking protein bar in a world dominated by a hyper-carnivore guild, a technical term for an ecosystem being absolutely stuffed with giant, specialized killing machines. In Africa, Europe, Asia, and the Americas, early humans weren't the mighty hunters. They were the all-you-can-eat buffet. Imagine leaving your cave and having to worry about Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat with steak knives for teeth. Homotherium, the scimitar-toothed cat built like a hyena for long-distance chases. Packs of 3-foot-tall dire wolves. Giant short-faced hyenas that could crush bone like pretzels. And the cave lion, a beast 25% larger than a modern African lion. This relentless, crushing pressure is what made us human. We didn't develop complex tools, social cooperation, and massive brains for fun. We did it because it was the only way to avoid being eaten. Every campfire was a tiny spark of defiance in an endless, hungry darkness. The greatest forgotten man-eater wasn't one animal. It was the entire natural order of a bygone era. Our ancestors survived a world that viewed them as little more than a convenient snack, and they graduated from the most brutal survival academy imaginable, where the penalty for failure was being dragged away in the night. The reason you're here, safe and sound, is because they learned, against all odds, to become the scariest monster on the plains. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.